term qualification does not relate to experiential qualification, but the ability of an individual to be able to be included in the ballot paper. It means qualifying criteria rather than academic qualifications. I think that's quite important to stress. Thank you, Chairperson, on that one. If we can move to the next one. The next one then deals with a concern that was raised across all provinces, Chairperson, that about the potentially longer ballot paper, as members of the community anticipate that there will be many independent candidates contesting provincial and national elections. There were those that are totally in support, or those that are not totally in support of independent candidates to contest elections, argued that stringent measures of entry, such as the high number of signatures and the high deposit fee, would assist in addressing the challenge of a potentially longer ballot paper. Now, these members of the community, Chairperson, were of the view that a longer ballot paper will confuse voters, particularly the elderly and the illiterate, which will lead to a higher number of spoiled ballot papers. So that was one of the concerns that was raised. Now, these members of the community are also of the view that the Electoral Amendment Bill should increase the threshold of participation in elections in order to avoid purely opportunistic candidates. And further, they also argued that the result will be that small parties and candidates will occupy key seats that hold a balance in a legislature where no party gets over 50% of the seats. And some then argued that this will lead to an unstable and temporary coalition that could paralyze the government service delivery. And our response at the top, if we can scroll up, is that the criteria developed may assist in curbing the list of those who qualify. If we can move to the next one. The next one, Chairperson, in terms of clause number 6, and it emanated in all the provinces. Many submissions from the provinces agreed with the insertion of clause 6, and I think there was synonymous calling for harsher sanctions. This is really around the code of conduct. There were those that believed there should be harsher sanctions, including disqualifications for any political party or independent candidate who contravene the code of conduct, as well as more rigorous vetting of the qualifications of candidates and their support signatures. It was also recommended during the hearings that mechanisms be put in place for the public to report any violations of the code or the requirements for independent candidates stated in clause 431B. I think we've noted that comment is aligned to what is in clause number 6. Now we move to clause number 8, Chairperson. In clause number 8, in all the provinces where there are opposing views, Chairperson, there are two opposing views with regards to the payment of non-refundable deposit fee that must be paid by independent candidates. Now, the first view, Chairperson, which was primarily raised by people who identified themselves to be members of political parties, in particular the African National Congress and the Economic Freedom Fighters, argued that the deposit fee for independent candidates should be set very high and should be non-refundable. Now, if you look at this view, is that if the deposit fee is set very low, there will be many opportunistic or questionable candidates, and they believe that it will dilute voter participation if elections become too complicated with too many choices and higher numbers of spoiled votes. And those who support this view also believe that the deposit fee should be non-refundable. If we can scroll down, Advocate, so that people can follow. So this view is that or those who support this view also believe that this fee should be non-refundable and forfeited to the state as it is proposed in the Electoral Amendment Bill. And then, of course, there was another view. The second opposing view is that the deposit fee should be set very low so that no one should be excluded from contesting elections due to financial constraints. The school of thought argues that a very high deposit fee will limit political contestation to the elite few and exclude grassroots organizations, women and persons with disabilities who have community support but do not have the finances, particularly considering the country's current high unemployment rate and economy. And of course, amongst those who argue the deposit fee should be affordable, there was also a small minority that also proposed that even if an independent candidate doesn't win a seat in the provincial or national legislature, their full deposit or a portion of it should be refundable. Now, linked to that, there was another matter that was also raised, which we believe it's separate and unrelated. There was also a question that was raised as to whether the deposit paid was related or aligned to Political Party Funding Act. Now, let's then go back to our response on the first one. On the first one, we are of the view that the IEC chairperson will further develop regulations relating to the fee required. It may be very well that the deposit fee required may be equivalent to that paid by political parties. And we're of the view that delegating this function to the IEC as an independent institution will ensure that the fee is reasonable. And of course, the administration of the ballot paper will remain within the mandate of the Independent Electoral Commission. Now, the latter part of a concern that was raised, if you can scroll down, there was a question that was raised, Chairperson, as to whether the deposit paid was related or aligned to the Political Party Funding Act. And our response is that no, the payment of the prescribed deposit fee cannot be aligned or related to the Political Funding Act. The two, if you will note, are completely separated and unrelated. That's the first response. And then, of course, as a result of the Electoral Amendment Bill, there will be consequential amendments relating to the Political Party Funding Act to include independent candidates. So that's our submission on those two issues. We'll now move to Clause 11. Now, Clause 11, Chairperson, the key emerging issue across all the provinces was mainly on the contestation with regards to the allocation of seats in the National Assembly and provincial legislatures between independent candidates and candidates representing political parties. Now, the first school of thoughts agrees with the Electoral Amendment Bill proposal regarding the allocation of seats in the provincial and national legislatures. They argue that this proposal, Chairperson, is the most suitable for South Africa as it allows for the continuation of the proportional representation or PR system, which has served the country well without any contestation of the freedom and fairness of elections. Now, those who support this school of thought argue, Chairperson, that it is only under the PR system that minority groups can find a political voice. For instance, it will include small parties that represent minority groups are most likely to have a representation on the PR system. Now, then there was an opposing view, which was supported mainly by communities who identified themselves as not members of political parties, and they argued that the proposed seat allocation system is biased towards political parties. In their view, Chairperson, all 400 seats in the National Assembly should be equally contested by both independent candidates and candidates of political parties. They further emphasize that there should be no number of seats that are reserved for contestation by political parties only. These members, Chairperson of the communities, further argued that any reservation of seats for political parties will be unconstitutional, as it will not only allow for an equal contestation as required by Section 19(3)(b) of the Constitution. For them, they argued that if voters want to be represented by 400 independent candidates, they should then be granted that opportunity. And then there were also submissions, Chairperson, calling for the proportion of regional versus compensatory seat to change from 75%, which translates to about 300, and 25% translating to about 100, respectively, from the 50-50 proposed, which is currently proposed in the amendment bill. And they argued that that is as per the Van Zyl-Slabbert report. Now, if you note further, is that also in this general view, there was also an argument that the closed list must be scrapped in favor of an open list because it does not add value in electing a representative. Now, if you look at clause 11.3, on the required number of candidates, they further argued that there were two submissions that believe that this should be dealt with as a matter of compliance prior to an election, rather than the complicated procedure concerning the forfeiture of seats, which is dealt with in clause number 11.16. I thought it's important to relate exactly the issues that were raised. Now, if you go to the top, where our response is provided for as informed by legal counsel, the reality is that, Chairperson, independent candidates are not political parties. Our view is that a single candidate cannot hold more than one seat. There is therefore no practical system of which we are aware that will avoid this issue. I think you skipped. And then further, an independent candidate, if they choose to run as an independent candidate rather than forming his or her own political party, if we scroll down, in doing so, they accept, he or she accepts, Chairperson, that he or she can only be elected to a maximum of one seat. The third area is that a voter voting for an independent candidate chooses to vote for the independent candidate rather than a political party. And in doing so, it therefore means that the voter accepts that they are indeed, if you can scroll down, Advocate, that the voter accepts that his candidate or a candidate can only be elected to a maximum of one seat. And then there can accordingly be no complaint of prejudice or unfairness by the independent candidate or the voter. So that's our submission with regards to that long concern that was raised. Now, the next one then deals with the regional seats. The main issues raised on this clause, which cuts across the provinces, is that the term regional seats, we dealt with it right at the beginning. There seems to be an issue that it is confusing in this regard. And then those who are opposed to this term argued that regional seats should be replaced by constituencies. They argued again, Chairperson, that the Electoral Amendment Bill should adopt the same proposal that was made by the Van Zyl-Slabbert report, supporting supporting the option 2 of the Ministerial Advisory Committee and Honorable Likota's 2020 private members bill. If we can scroll down, and you will note that in the hearings there were suggestions that ranged from 66 to 200 constituencies. Of emphasis is that independent candidates and political party candidates must compete for the votes in their constituencies without reserving seats for political parties. And then there was that concern that was also raised in the bill. The proposed 9 regions will require 82,000 or 5.5% of votes for each independent candidate's seat, compared to the 40,000 in the last elections, and they indicated that this was unfair if you were to compare them with other activities. Now, I then indicated that this was unfair when small political parties could get a seat with less than 1% of the vote. Now, further support for this view also called for more extensive review of the system as indicated, and then concerns that or issues that were raised were, for example, the call that was made by former President Mandela when he left office in 1999 for a review of the electoral system. And then they also recalled that in 2002, President Mbeki established a task team led by Van Zyl Slabbert to examine electoral reform, and the team called for a more accountable system which would have combined constituency-based representation by voting for a specific individual and proportional representation known as a mixed system. Again, they then indicated that in 2006, Parliament had appointed an individual panel to assess the electoral system, and they found it in need for which found that there was a need of electoral reform. And their view was that since 2006, the last of the 4 investigations confirming the need for electoral reform, and that no concrete action had been taken in 16 years ago, in addition to some political parties that have held office since 1994. So these are some of the issues that were raised. Then there was an alternative proposal that was raised for the calculations of regional seats, which was made. The proposal was as follows, that there should be a 2-stage process where all who meet the full quota for 1 seat be awarded a seat, whether as parties or independent candidates. Once no one is left who is entitled to a seat based on the meeting, then the full quota threshold, meaning that the seats should then be given to the parties that have the highest average of votes per seat won. So there's a lot of detail that's provided in terms of that issue that was raised. Then there was another concern that was raised across provinces around the discarding of votes. Advocate, if you can scroll down to the bottom part. Yeah, there we go. So there was another concern that was raised across provinces with regards to discarding votes once an independent candidate meets the threshold for a seat. And many of those who opposed the discarding of votes did not really offer any alternative solutions, but indicated discarding surplus votes goes against the equality clause in the Constitution, and it means that surplus voters are deprived. They argued that surplus voters are deprived of an opportunity to participate in an election. And they also argued that the PR list should be introduced to deal with situation wherein a candidate dies or resigns. It is worth to note that One South Africa movement and others argued that the excess votes of independent candidates should be transferable to candidates identified by the winner of these excess votes in advance of the elections, as per Honorable Likota's bill. They further argued that this will also better allow for the inclusion of independent candidates in the National Council of Provinces seats if their predetermined affiliates could be represented in the NCOP if they have a seat in the National Assembly. This view was, however, rejected by more of the oral submissions than those in support. Now, if we go back to our response to this matter, right at the top, our response is that there are 400 seats in the National Assembly, and then the first 200 seats, as proposed in the amendment bill, is that the first 200 seats are elected from each of the 9 provinces or regions, and that the remaining 200 seats are compensatory seats that are designed to achieve the proportional representation required to be achieved by Section 46(1)(d) of the Constitution. Chairperson, it is also correct that the independent candidates may only be elected to occupy the 200 regional seats as stated in the amendment bill. If we scroll down, all right. The second reality, Chairperson, is that independent candidates are not political parties, and therefore a single candidate cannot hold more than one seat. There is therefore no practical system of which we are aware that will avoid the so-called wasted votes issue as raised in one of the consents at the top. So if we can move to the next one. Thank you. Again, Chairperson, I think this is the last one. There was a concern that was raised around vacancies. And again, there were two opposing views on this clause. The first view, which was raised by those again who identified themselves to be members of political parties, was to support the proposal of the Electoral Amendment Bill that vacancies that are left by independent candidates should be left vacant until the next election. Their rationale, Chairperson, for supporting this proposal is that the country will be in perpetual elections, which then disturbs the service delivery, and it's very costly as political parties. If we can scroll down. Yeah, in that it will be very costly as political parties and independent candidates will continually be campaigning if the seats should not or should be filled. Now, we've provided a response that's supported by Council, and our view is that it will be utterly impractical, Chairperson, and an unjustified financial strain on the fiscus, but also on the ability of the states. If you were to imagine that every time there's a vacancy, you then have to have an election for the state to govern, to similarly provide for a replacement of the independent candidate through a by-election. And of course, this is because independent candidates are voted for at a provincial or regional level. Now, as a result, the by-election will have to be organized at a provincial or regional level every time there is a vacancy in the National Assembly. Chairperson, that then ends our submission with regards to concerns or issues that were raised during the public hearings and also is contained in the report that you have shared with us. Thank you so much. Back to you, the Minister.
Thank you very much, DG. Chairperson, I revert back to you. That is our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members. The chairperson has indicated that he is having some challenges with network, and if it happens that he doesn't speak, then I should continue then with the meeting. I think I was handing over to Minister, but Minister's already indicated that he's done and his presentation is. Does the DM have anything to add before we move?
No, thank you. I think the presentation represents everything that we wanted to say. And as the Minister has said, we are done. We'll only come in when we need to take some of the questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. We're now going to proceed to members, and we're going to start in the order of co-chair. We'll start with you, and then we'll move to, okay, I see Honorable Roos's hand up. Before we proceed, can I just take his hand? Honorable Roos? Honorable Roos, is that an old hand?
Sorry,
okay, members, let us.
Talking to me?
Yes, Honorable Ross, you had your hand up. I thought you wanted to raise something before we proceed.
Oh, no, Chair, sorry, I just lost my signal. That's why.
No. Thank you very much. Members, there seems to be a challenge with the MTN network. I've also been able to establish that, but we're going to proceed. I'm going to start with Honorable Lizal, Co-Chair. Honorable Minister.
No, sorry. Go on. My apologies. It was just a small.
So we are going to we're going to start with Honorable Lizal. We're going to move to Honorable Kanile. Chair, you're back. Do you want to proceed?
No. Thanks, Honorable Pile, for, as you've noted, that there's a network issue, and apologies for members. The DG, thank you very much. You now concluded your presentation on behalf of the department. We will start with the understanding was that after the DG, the minister will comment and the DM, unless we take another approach to invite members for comment, and then they'll respond to that. The minister has suggested that we need to, or the DM comment after that. Minister, is that an understanding was holding?
No, we have already responded, Chair, by saying...
Chair, we've covered that already. Both Minister and DM has said we must proceed.
Okay. No, thanks. Apologies. Thanks very much for that clarity. We'll move on that line. We'll invite Honorable Lizel. We'll invite Honorable Tswako, Honorable Mulekwa, Honorable Ross, Honorable Ramulobeng, Honorable Kanyile, and Honorable Pile. I'm not sure whether Honorable Tito and Honorable Lokwase and Veteran Lupota are in attendance. I can't see them on the notes, but Matonsi will indicate to us in that order. Co-Chair, Honorable Lizette.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you very much to the DG, the Minister, and the DM for the presentation. I don't have any questions of clarity. I think the department's position is very clear. However, I want to make the point that, of course, I think all of the issues that were raised during the public hearings had merit. For example, I think, the issue of the discarded votes, as much as we hear the reasoning that, of course, an independent candidate cannot transfer votes, there were solutions or possible ideas put forward by people in terms of how they want us to deal with that. The issue around deposits for independents or the fees, the registration fee and whether that money is returned to them or not. So, of course, I think all of those issues have got merit, and it's then, it will be up to us as a committee to decide on how we deal with these issues once we get into the processing of the bill and the clause by clause and all the other processes that we will undertake. But for now, I think the presentation by the department is clear, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Lizel, for your comment and contribution. Honorable Tswako, Dr. Tswako, and congratulations again.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I just comment.
Your network is a bit, I think you can get a proper space, Honorable Tswako. Yeah, let's try to proceed. Honorable Tswako.
Okay, can you hear me now, Chair? Sorry.
Yeah, you are better now.
Okay, no, I was just saying that also it's not time to attend that. But Chair, mine was to say that we have students against them submitted the submission and on all the participation, and we request that
Honorable, I think was struggling to get you clearly. I'm not sure how you are going to assist that. so that you're audible. Yeah, I'll call you again. Let me go to, just find the space there. Honorable Mulekwa.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Let me start by appreciating the presentation has been presented and also appreciate the effort for compiling a comprehensive report on the Amendment Bill on Electoral Act. Chairperson, would like to note and welcome the report as been presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mulekwa. Honorable Ross.
Thank you, Chairperson. I hope I'm clear. Chairperson, yeah, I understand most of the responses. I think the one question is really around the seat allocation. And clearly there's been quite a bit of concern about that and how it relates to proportionality. And the DG mentioned, there's a 3-stage system and that a 2-stage system was also raised. My question of clarity is why is the existing system not being considered? If you consider that in the first stage it sort of looks at proportionality, but where you have independents that are sort of then get awarded a single seat, why the droop quota isn't then considered somewhere in that mix? Because it seems, Chairperson, from a number of respondents that the big issue there is that you can have an independent that needs to get 80,000 votes to get a seat, for example, where a political party might end up only needing 40,000. And that's where the issue of proportionality is coming in, and the existing system of seat allocation. I'm just wondering why that is not considered at all. Because in that scenario, one could have a situation where you, at least with the droop quota, try and you allocate seats to independents that don't get a full seat, but that get close to a seat. Whereas with the current system, they would lose out, but then in a further round, a political party would get that seat with less votes. So the gist of my question is, why is the existing seat allocation system not being considered? Because, Chairperson, you could have a scenario where, let's say, and I'm pretty certain it's not going to happen, but you could have 90% of votes going to independent candidates across South Africa, for example. And then you'd have a situation where literally they would then only be able to get half the seats in Parliament. And then the rest of the persons might get, or the parties might get 1% each, in an extreme example. And then they would actually be able to form a coalition and have the same number of seats as 90% of the persons. So I think the main issue here that hasn't been addressed to my satisfaction is, with the 3-step system, why is the existing system not being considered?
Thank you, Honorable Ross, for your contributions. Honorable Jose.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, I actually recommend, but would like to say, let's note the report and send it as a portfolio committee to the legal team of Parliament for at a later stage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Let me try Honorable Tswako. Okay, Honorable Ramolobe. Honorable Kanyile.
Good morning, Chairperson, and greetings to the Minister, the Deputy Minister, the colleagues, and the representatives from the Department of Home Affairs. Chairperson, we note the presentation as well as the responses from the department, and we welcome that. I think I have been covered by Honorable Rose. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can I check Honorable Tswako, if you're back?
Chair, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Proceed.
Oh, no. Okay. No, that's fine. Change the chairperson. We would like to actually submit ourselves our official, the position of the EFF if it needs to be. We said in one of those, I think that we agree with the department in terms of that the threshold nomination for independent must not be less than 20,000 people who are registered to vote. Because you cannot have people there just in willy-nilly trying to come and do, the contestation. So we propose that the independent must submit not less than 20,000 people who are registered to vote, and those people must be able to be verifiable, so that you don't have me call or get the people who are going to be put there and say, no, these are the people who are going to be vote for me. And also in terms of the deposit of the independence that it must be the same deposit as a deposit paid by political parties, and it must not be refundable. I think that probably, if I hear the department well, that we do agree with each other that we propose it must not be refundable, so that you don't have, again, a long list of ballots. Because if you make this thing very simple, you will have almost 10,000 people. I mean, that ballot will be almost a whole, the kilometer that is there. And we strongly discourage by-elections to replace the independent, the candidates. So we want to support that the fact that if an independent passes on or resign in parliament or legislature, we must not have any by-election, because the country will be in a permanent election mode. And also it will open up some opportunities where people will be, will be targeted, to replace and all those kind of things like that. So we discourage the view that there must be any by-elections there. So I think that also that those who contest as independent candidates and get higher votes, I think that is required. They must forfeit those votes, the remaining votes, because you would have been given a clear and equal opportunity and option to contest as a political party. So that thing of saying that I've got these votes more, we must transfer them out, I think we must be able to discourage that. I think that will also make a formal, we'll send you this, our position as the EFF. We've actually participated in all these, the debates across the country. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Tsako. Can I check Honorable Mrambulo then? She's back on the line. Honorable Pile.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think, Chair, firstly, let me just say that we note the report, and we also must applaud the responses that we've received in terms of comments. Chair, there's just two minor things that I want to perhaps suggest. The one is on clause, I'm just going to open that clause, where we talk about an individual voting for an independent. I think it's clause 11. Yes, clause 11. That we should also add the word collective, because one of the submissions that were being made when it comes to this surplus votes, or inverted commas wasted, because we are not saying wasted, it's what they were saying when they were submitting, that it's wasted votes. But the submission was that the votes should then be moved to a next independent. And the response or the argument should be that not just political parties, but they're not voting for a collective. When a voter votes for an independent, they are voting for an individual, not a political party and not a collective. They've decided to vote for a person, not for more than one person. So you can't then transfer votes to anyone else. And then the other point is to add the word ballot booklet, because it came out in many of the hearings where in terms of the filling of vacancies and also in terms of the ballot being too long, that in order to have, the reason for criteria or to make sure that there is some kind of qualifying criteria is to ensure that you don't have a long drawn out process. One was that the ballot doesn't become a ballot booklet. And two was that the process of election does not get extended. Currently, we vote in a single day with special votes being 2 days before. If you had to go with a ballot booklet, it means that you're going to have elections over a week or maybe longer than a week. And we don't have the resources to be able to do that. We also don't have the resources to be able to put up ballot booklets and have that number of independents. Chair, I want to propose that as the committee, we note this report and that we also then move to the program of action in terms of the charting the way forward for the rest of the process. I thank you.
Thank you, honorable members, honorable Pillay, for all your contributions. I'm going to invite the minister to make comments on the issues that were raised, and then we will outline the process, how we're going to run this item on the electoral interaction. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you very much for inputs by honorable members. I've got a few remarks to make, Chairperson. I've repeated it many times and I still want to repeat it. That the Van Zyl-Slabbert report consists of 72 pages. In none of the pages is the word independent ever arising. They have said nothing whatsoever about independence, and people keep on quoting it as if the report was about bringing independence parliament. The main thing about Van Zyl-Slabbert was about constituencies. And our report is about constituencies, even though it's a bit different from the way he wanted to define such constituencies. The second thing is about a mention is made of the Lokota bill. If I'm not mistaken, speaking under correction, Chairperson, there is no Lokota bill now because the honorable veteran Lokota has withdrawn his bill, and he did not just withdraw it. It was after we have responded to the issues that were raised in that bill. You remember I am in front of this committee and offered not a criticism, but a critique of what was in that bill, showing the impracticality of some of the proposal, and hence it was withdrawn. The third thing I want to say is that the Constitutional Court judgment is very clear on paragraph 15 of the judgment. It says as to what type of electoral system the country is going to adopt. It's not an issue of the Constitutional Court. It's an issue of Parliament. Parliament has got the sole responsibility, the power and the right in their own wisdom to decide on a particular electoral system of the country, not the courts. So what we're doing as a Department of Home Affairs was responding to the 24 months given by the Constitutional Court to accommodate independence. And that's exactly what we are doing. And we think we have done it in a way as much as possibly could. The fourth thing I want to say, Chairperson, is that we took a long time before we came with a policy after the Constitutional Court judgment. We were criticized for that. There was a belief that we are scared to make any changes. But we took a long time because we were studying electoral systems around the whole world. We tried everything in our power, and we gave you an example of a few during my first presentation in Parliament. There is no electoral system anywhere in the world that is so perfect as to meet all the concerns and the desires of people in that particular country. Every electoral system we studied has got its own vices, has got its good point, but it also has got its points which will never be satisfied about. But countries have been able to choose what they regard as important for their country. And no particular electoral system of one country can 100% feed into the need of a different country. So we have got very difficult choices to make. Honorable Ruas, I tried my best to understand you about the existing system of allocation of seats. And my worry is in the existing system, there are no independents. I'm not very sure whether the present existing system will adequately provide for independence, because when the system was provided for, there were no independents in South Africa. And secondly, I thought we were finally agreed that the seats will be allocated in 2 steps. And the reason is because we want to give independents as much chance as possible to get into parliament. And that's why the first seats are by them only. They are not contesting with the political parties, only them amongst themselves. And this fact is forgotten. I don't hear anybody mentioning. They keep on mentioning that no political parties has got an advantage. And nobody says, but we are giving independents an advantage of being allocated seats alone without any political party getting anything. Only after we have accommodated all of them, at least those who reach a quota, is then that we go for political parties. The other thing I want to mention, Chairperson, let me take this opportunity to congratulate Dr. Tswaku. I've never been able to attend a meeting where he was present after I've heard an announcement that he has got a doctorate. But Dr. Tswaku, allow me to be a little bit silly. When they announced your doctorate, it was, if I'm not mistaken, about information technology. But I noticed that every time we've got this session, you struggle to connect, because not because you don't know how to, but you're always in an area where there's no connectivity. Can I propose that we end that irony, so that every time we've got a portfolio, look for another area, because we are missing your inputs all the time. It's not the first time that you meet your inputs because of connectivity. But anyway, that was just by the way. I was just becoming silly. I'm very proud of is that a response from Dr. Tswaku?
Minister, have you finished with the comments?
No, I'm seeing that is on the screen. I thought you wanted to say something, but I was just saying, look, I really heartily congratulate you. The first time you told that he has got qualification in this area, when we were at the government printing works, I really didn't understand fully what you meant. I now understand. That's why I'm heartily congratulating you. The last issue, Chairperson, I want honorable members to remember the steps that we took until we arrived here where we are.
Honorable Tswaku, you're now disrupting our meeting, your meeting. Minister, proceed.
Yeah, firstly, as I said, we took a long time starting electoral systems around the whole world. We came up with a policy which we presented to cabinet, and the cabinet allowed us to bring it to parliament. We presented in front of this portfolio committee. I then decided as a minister, with your support, to choose a ministerial task team, which was led by Honorable Vali Musa. I want to state in that report, Chairperson, if you revisit it, there's a paragraph where they said after they went to the constitutional hill to call political parties, members of the public and stakeholders to make their presentation, they clearly stated in that report that there was no emerging sufficient consensus. That meaning among political parties and stakeholders, there was no emerging pattern on exactly what type of system do we need to adopt and what type of policies It reminded me of the early days of CODESA, where we're making consensus by what we call there is sufficient imaging consensus, we can go forward. That report clearly said there is no sufficient imaging consensus. And that is why among themselves, they also came with two options. And we took one of the options and we ran with it. That's where we are today. I just thought it's important to remind everybody about doing something. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. DM, is there any other matter you want to comment on?
No, nothing.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister and your team and honorable members. This was a process to get responses from yourselves, the minister and your legal team, on the issues which have emerged in our consultation or engagement with various stakeholders. And it does not constitute, or the comments of the members does not constitute the resolve of the committee at this stage. It's a process that will assist the committee to interact with these matters as we move forward. And also at a particular stage, we may also call back the Home Affairs to deal with certain issues. Secondly, just for correction, so that it does not seem, it does not go out as an affirmation of the committee. The private members' bill of Honorable Veteran Lekota was not withdrawn by Veteran Lekota. The private members' bill was presented before the committee and were interacted with it. We've also requested the minister to comment on it, and there were some of the issues which Veteran Lekota had to agree on it on the views or submission of the minister. Then the committee decided, after consideration of the issues, not to proceed with the private members' bill. So the clarity that I want us to recollect on our minutes and notes, so that it doesn't get into records that Honorable Lekota withdrew the private members' bill. We did deliberated on it, and the committee did consider not to proceed with the private members' bill and proceed with the executive Electoral Amendment Bill. So that is a matter that I wanted us to get clarity on. The third point is that we're going to request Mr. Matonsi to just highlight the items, the revised program, so that we understand how we're going to run on this process in terms of interacting with it until at the time the committee is going to take a decision and submit a report to National Assembly. Mr. Matonsi, I'm going to allow you this opportunity to just take the meeting on a revised program. All the issues that the minister and the DG and the DM have raised, or the presentation of the legal team, will form part of the deliberation as we move forward on this item. Mr. Matonsi, are you on the platform?
Chairperson, I'm on the platform. I'm struggling to share. Every time when I want to share, the previous presentation appears on my screen. If advocate can remove it, please. Advocate. Chairperson?
Yes, we're waiting for you,
yes.
Mr. Matonsi.
Yeah, I'm struggling to share it. I don't know, there's a screen that is appearing on the system. I'm not sure if it's the screen that was done by Advocate Malakate. But instead of wasting time, can I go through it without sharing it?
It will be important because so that the public and all stakeholders understand fully how are we going to interact on this matter. Advocate Malikani, can you assist each other to remove the screen which it was? Who are the? Yes.
Okay. Are you able to say it, Chairperson?
Yeah, just increase the. Is this the reverse?
Is the second tab program? Are you able to say it?
Yeah. No, can't see. Just increase the, so that you are able to talk to it, and then just increase the, so that we're members.
Oh, okay, Chairperson. If you are able to see it, I'll start from the 6th of May, because for next week Tuesday we'll be dealing with the APP and the budget of the IEC and the government printing work. So we won't be dealing with the bill next week on Tuesday, but on Friday, as indicated earlier on, the legal service will also respond on any constitutional issues or legal issues that could be identified in the report that was responded to by the department. That will be on Friday, 6 May. And then on 10 May, which is on a Tuesday, then after today's meeting and next week Friday's meeting, the content advisor will still further consolidate the report that was done today, and then that report will be considered by the committee and adopted. That will be on the 10th of May. And then I will also do the motion of desirability before we start with the issue of deliberations. And then from there, if there's enough time, and then we'll also start deliberating on the bill. And then on the 13th of May, we'll also be deliberating on the further deliberation on the bill. And then on the 7th, not on the 17th, on the 18th of May is consideration and adoption of the A list and the amended B bill. And then we finalize the bill on the 24th of May. We extended it because there are certain issues. It was supposed to be on the 18th, but now we have moved it to the 24th of May. Chairperson, I want to indicate that if you recall in the earlier program, we also wanted the IEC, and you also mentioned in today's meeting that the IEC should also respond. But I think like we discussed in the last meeting during MENCO, we need to schedule the issue of the IEC. When will the IEC come back to brief the committee or to comment on the bill before we start with the deliberation or after the deliberation, Chairperson? That's all what the problem entails at the moment.
No, thanks very much. I wanted us to outline the process we're going to engage on, and just to re-emphasize that the committee at this stage has not begun to deliberate on the Electoral Amendment Bill. We're receiving responses or comments on all the submissions were made to the committee, so that we are one in terms of the process that the committee is going to take and afford the committee to deal with. The second point is that this program may change because we're going to, that three issues are related to the IEC, which we ought to do further consultation and effect on the program. The first one is the report of the local government elections, that this committee still has to factor it. The second one is the referral of the report. As you recall that the term of the chairperson or the term of the commissioner, Mashinini, has ended, and there was a process of interviews, and the report has since been submitted to the speaker and has been referred to the committee for consideration in terms of the deliberating on the candidates which were processed, so that we resolve on the commissioner. That also needs to be factored in. The third one is, as we indicate, Mr. Matonsi and members, on the comments of the IEC on the Electoral Amendment Bill that we are dealing with. So we've reworked our program of action so that we prioritize in the main this Electoral Amendment Bill. As you see, there are certain items that are not have been removed and have been, so that we're going to see how we're going to factor it, this item, the three which are related to IEC, so that we work on all the items that are before us. That is the program, members, the minister, and the IEC and the stakeholders on how we're going to deal with this matter. Is there any other matter, Mr. Matonsi?
Chairperson, no, there's no other matter, Chairperson.
Okay. Thanks very much, honorable members, for taking time to, and the stakeholders, the IEC commissioners and the executive who are here, and the media component for this response of the department on the issues that the public have raised. As we move also, if there are other issues, request the IEC, so the minister and the team to come to the committee and respond, so that at the time the committee is going to deliberate, all the issues have already been submitted before the committee, and members of the committee are able to enhance their clarity on how they're going to contribute to this important piece of legislation. I want to thank you, Minister, and your legal team, and all honorable members who were here in the meeting, and stakeholders, the legal team of the Parliament and that of Home Affairs and the IEC. Our meeting stands adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Chairperson.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you, honorable members. Goodbye.
Bye-bye, Minister.
Thank you.